Bengals executive vice president Katie Blackburn, when asked if Joe Mixon would be the team's starting running back in 2023, she said, "Right now he's on the team, and we are going to count on him until that wouldn't be the case." Jay, not exactly the vote of confidence that you typically hear for a guy that's been, the franchise running back for a couple of years.
That's the exact quote that NBC said about me, by the way. He's asked about me.
He's on the
Matthew
team.
Berry is currently on our roster. Yes. He currently has a show for Peacock. Yes.
And until he doesn't.
Right, yeah, exactly.
We're not talking about it.
Right, correct.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. I'm Connor Rodgers alongside, still on the team, Matthew Berry, still on the team, Jay Croucher.
Well, we haven't gotten to June 1st yet. I could easily
Post-June
be a post-June
first cut.
Exactly.
Save that money.
So we'll see.
Yeah, there we go.
We will see.
A lot of transaction talk today on the desk.
A lot of transaction talk.
Absolutely.
Here on the desk. But yes, thank you to NBC for keeping me employed. We had a nice vacation last week. It was a great week. What?
Who's this we on vacation?
I'm speaking
for
about
you
myself in the
Oh,
week.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We, me, my wife, my kids.
There we go.
Did you guys not get the week off?
I had a week off.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Okay.
I went to Denver, Colorado with my family, and my wife and I
Lovely.
resolved after the flight with the 3 kids, 5 and under, that we won't be flying with the kids for at least another 15
You do that a lot,
20 years.
quite a bit.
It's
yeah.
over. Yeah,
It's
that's over.
bold of you.
Yeah.
Flying with kids is tough.
There's nothing worse. There's absolutely nothing.
It's
And you know
rock
what? There's
bottom.
nothing worse is the guy in front of you in the row, like really being upset and asking the flight attendant for earplugs, like in a way that's loud enough so that you can hear
No,
it. It's all right, thanks. What do you want me to do?
Well,
What do you
were
want me
your
to do?
kids kicking his chair,
There
or
was
were
a
they
little
just
kicking.
loud?
There was a little kicking.
All right, so in essence, it's the guy in front of you's fault that you don't have control of your children.
Well, that would be his
Oh.
argument. Yeah, my argument would be I'm doing everything that I can for you.
No, I once. This is an embarrassing story, but I once. So me and I have twin daughters, obviously, that are 11. But my wife and I once took them somewhere, and I forget how it was, but we had to get somewhere, and it was like the only tickets that were available on this flight, the one flight that we could have, were all in first class. Like the whole flight was sold out, but there were 4, and like we had to, because like it's like first class is a waste for like a 5-year-old, whatever. But we're like we have to do it because we needed, for whatever reason, we needed this one flight. It was the only one that was available, so we bought it. And I literally my wife was like, I'm going to be horrified. I went up and I said, as soon as we walked in, I just turned to the entire first class and I said, I apologize. I apologize in advance. I know you guys bought first class tickets, and now I hear them with annoying children, and I just apologize in advance, and drinks are on me. Now, drinks are free in first class.
Yeah, this is good play. Good play.
But whatever. People laughed, and there were a lot of people were like, oh, we have kids too. We get it. Don't worry about it. And so I think preemptively recognizing is the way to go.
Yes. I was on a flight where in first class was Brian Daboll with his young family, and I was thinking like, oh, is this going to be a little noisy? Brian Daboll managed his family expertly. Didn't make a whole noise.
He's
a great
That's
coach.
why you know he's coach of the
Coach
year.
of the year. There you go.
Coach Unbelievable
of the
job.
year.
He has a handle on the
In first
locker
class
room.
with Brian
Brian
Daboll.
Daboll.
Handle on the
Yes.
locker room.
No culture
100
problems with Brian Daboll.
Just a magnificent manager of
Yeah,
kids.
exactly. Just
kills me.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I
A
wanna hire him
well-worthy
again.
coach of the year. Wouldn't you agree, Jay Croucher?
I
Nobody deserved
guess
it
I would
more
agree.
than Brian
Yeah,
Daboll.
he did a great job.
Yes.
I don't know, Kyle Shanahan, 10
It
wins
should
in a
have
row.
been,
with the last
Kyle
pick of the draft.
Shanahan, but
That's
Daboll
fine.
did an
Yeah, that's
amazing
fine.
job. This is a pro Brian Daboll
Yeah, we love
desk
Brian Daboll.
here at the Happy Hour. He's the kind of coach that I'm hopeful that perhaps the new owners of the Commanders could try to steal away from the New York Giants.
Yeah, you keep making these demands. Lamar Jackson is quarterback,
Yes.
coached by Brian Daboll.
Yes.
Here's what I would
Bill
say.
Belichick GM.
Yeah.
Look. So the news broke just a few days ago that the Washington Commanders, that I think where we currently are is that there's an agreement in principle for the Josh Harris group. Josh Harris, Mitchell Rales, Magic Johnson, that group has agreed in principle to terms with Daniel Snyder, and the details of that deal have been submitted to a committee, has been submitted to the NFL. And so the last thing I saw, I think I saw this in the Washington Post this morning, is that the NFL thought there were no major issues with the proposal, that there was a few minor things that they think can get worked out. But it's a non-exclusive offer. There's still, it's still open. Snyder has a couple of demands as well. There's always going to be rumblings that Jeff Bezos could step in at any minute, despite the fact that he's continually said he's out, he's not interested, he hasn't, but There's always going to be that rumor, and there's other bids potentially swirling as well. But, guys, there's an agreement in principle. There is almost positively going to be a new owner of my beloved Washington Commanders come this fall. Hail the Commanders, hail victory. Let's go.
And here we go. If you want to see a little Matthew Berry celebration.
It's Matthew Berry in Florida.
I'm legit drunk right now. Current situation.
Yeah, I was quote tweeting Jordan Zevon, who said, like, I can hear Matthew Berry's screams right now. He tweeted out, one of the headlines about the agreement had happened between the Josh Harris group and Daniel Snyder to sell the Commanders to the Harris group. So I'm very excited about it, by the way. Like, that's the group I want, of the groups that have emerged as viable candidates. Like, again, make no mistake, if somebody else winds up with it, I will also suck up to them. But I want to be here on national television and say, like, no, Josh Harris is a professional sports team owner.
That's what he does.
I mean, it's what he's been massively successful in everything he's ever done, right? In terms of what he's done with Apollo and everything that he's built up there. But again, whether it's the Sixers, whether it's the Devils, he has a minority interest in Crystal Palace. Like, all you hear around the sports world is just how well those organizations are run, and you can argue about the on-the-field results and everything like that, or the on-the-ice results, as it were. But ultimately, all you want is a franchise that runs like a professional franchise, that treats its fans and employees and players with respect, and that's what you hear out of everyone that works that works for Josh Harris on his many, many interests. I'm thrilled. Obviously, Magic Johnson's a champion. I don't know a ton about Mitchell Rails, but like, I'm on board. I love it.
How do we get you in the group? Like, what's the minority stake lowest price?
That's what I'm asking.
And then you could say I'm in the Harris group.
I know 1,000%.
He couldn't be more in.
Like, could not be more in. I will write that check tomorrow. Again, it's got to be a small.
Just say, what's the minimum for me to be a minority owner?
100%. Believe it. I know you're joking.
No, I'm not. I know you are very into this. You and RG3 are not joking about this.
I've asked this question. I've asked this question of everyone I know. How can I weasel my way in to own 0.00001% of this team, or whatever it is, how can I get in? How can I get in? So I'm working on it. We'll see. I'm available.
Matthew Berry, if you like alongside LeBron, Wade, and Bosh, he'd be like the Mario Chalmers.
Do you think this is a question that has come up? This is Mario. It's obviously a massive long shot. But if I was somehow able to wind up as a minority owner of the Washington Commanders, do you think this is? I'm gonna be real question here.
It's gonna be tough.
Do you think? No. I don't know. I don't know what NBC's reaction would be like that. Like, I don't know what
bias?
No, I don't think there's a bias issue.
What's the fear here?
There's no bias issue. I mean, like, I got a Brian Robinson jersey up there. I mean, I'm well known as a Commanders fan. I've been very blatant and open about that. But my question is like, first off, part of my job is to bet on sports. Jay and I'm not as much of a degenerate as Jay, but I'm reasonably.
You're catching up by the day.
We're at the MGM chaos.
I'm closer to Jay.
Yes.
On the scale of like pious to degenerate Jay, I'm much closer to Jay than I am to pious over here. But are NFL owners allowed to bet on sport? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Like, if I had a minority,
almost certainly not.
I would say no.
That's what I'm saying.
But is it majority owners compared to minority stake?
Yeah, I don't know the answers to any of these things, and I would love to know the answers to this, because that might mean that it's real.
We're gonna need to set up a call. All of these things.
So I need NBC HR to weigh in. Anyway, but yes, I am, and if anyone watching has an in, hook a brother up. That's all I'm asking. That's all I'm asking. But regardless of whether I am somehow able to weasel my way in, I could not be more thrilled at a potential ownership change.
I mean, ownership is the biggest advantage in professional sports. Honestly, it ripples through absolutely everything. And to go to competent ownership, I mean, even quarterbacks come and go.
Right.
And what is overseeing the organization is the most important. And you see that. The Sixers now are just clearly an expertly run organization from the top down, from Harris down to Daryl Morey to Doc Rivers to Joel Embiid. It just makes sense and it works. The Devils are one of the best stories in the NHL this season. Crystal Palace had a nice win on the weekend as well, so it's all happening.
Right. It's Josh Harris's world. We just live in it. But you're 100% right. And you can go through sports and you sort of point out good ownership, poor ownership, and I think there is an argument to be made, and I don't think it's a tough one, that Daniel Snyder is the worst owner in professional sports history. Like who's worse in professional sports history? I mean, right?
He's on the Mount Rushmore. I'll give you that.
I don't know. Sterling.
He's next. Sterling's up there.
Yeah.
Obviously.
What a Mount Rushmore.
I mean,
the Mount Rushmore of worst ownership of all time.
Yeah.
See,
good question
this
of the
is we'll get into a whole thing. My counter to that is, yes, Sterling was a bad owner, but I think he's a much worse person than an actual owner in terms of what he did with the Clippers. He's a terrible, awful human being.
Yes.
You know what I mean? By what he was caught on tape saying, by what he did with like the tenement housing and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of the actual ownership of the Clippers, it felt like he mostly just kind of like he wasn't great for the Clippers, but like he never cheated. He never cheated season ticket holders. He never cheated other NBA owners. Like he never let the arena fall into disarray. Like things. Railings never fell on fans in any of the Clippers stadiums. Sewage.
Yeah.
Raw sewage never fell. Right.
Yeah. Elton Brand never had a seat collapse on him.
Right. They never had a day for like a superstar Clipper, like a beloved deceased member of the Clippers, and then put them in front of like porta potties, like they did on Sean Taylor Day, and they put Sean Taylor's family in front of porta. I mean, like.
To be fair, the Clippers have never had a superstar player, but that's beside the point. Until Kawhi Leonard.
Anyway, I'm just
didn't expect to get there, but we did. And with that, I will gladly move us to our Roto World headlines of the day, and we start with today's news. Yes.
We do have one quick positive, Commanders. It's all the fact that it's going to be sold, super positive, right? The second piece is like, listen, they're committing to Sam Howell. They're committing to Sam Howell. The dreams of Lamar Jackson going away, but the fact is like this is great. And my only request of Ron Rivera and the coaching staff and the entire organization here is give Sam the whole year, because one of two things happens. Either we discover over the course of a year, hey, the kid can play. We've got a franchise quarterback, and we've got him on a rookie deal, a cheap rookie deal, because he was, I believe, a fifth-round pick. Yeah. So we have him on a fifth-round rookie deal for the next 3 years after this season. Awesome. Amazing, right? So that will be huge. Or we discover that Sam Howell can't play, and that's okay. Still, give him the entire year. Do not bring in Jacoby Brissett, because Jacoby Brissett
will win you games.
I don't want to win any. Yeah. I either want to know
not
Sam
enough,
Howell,
but too many.
That's right. Jacoby Brissett is 7 or 8 wins, and that'll get us right around to pick 15 or 16, which is where we pick every single year. And there'll be like, there's not like either we discover Sam Howell can be the guy, or if he's not, we need to be bad enough that we can draft the guy next year, because next year should be an amazing quarterback class as well.
It will be. Yeah, there are 3 guys at the top that'll be really good. So you want to be really bad, or you want to figure it out.
Yep.
No,
that's right.
You never want to tread water in the NFL.
This is correct. I like the fact that you looked directly at me when you said you never want to tread water. It is what it is at this point in my career. Connor, I am what I am. You know what? I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
You're doing pretty good.
Jacoby Brissett.
I'm the Jacoby Brissett of fantasy analyst. I like that.
Winning too many games.
Good last year.
I am.
You and Jacoby had a good year last year. Let me tell you. Underrated.
Yeah. Fair enough. I'm just right there.
So we go to today's news, and that is a reoccurring theme on this show.
Yes, sir.
That has to do with Trey Lance. And the latest is NFL Network's Ian Rappaport reports that the 49ers have fielded calls from teams interested in trading for Lance. He was very specific that it's not the Niners shopping Trey Lance, but they have fielded calls. Guys, when the Niners signed Sam Darnold this offseason, and we know how much they like Brock Purdy, obviously Brock Purdy's health pending, there was an interesting variable with Trey Lance of is his future in San Francisco with, it feels like leaning no. This is the first signal to me that Trey Lance will not be on the 49ers next year.
I feel like that's got to be the way to go, right? Because it's almost, in a weird way, it's the reverse Garoppolo situation, right? Which is that when Garoppolo, they wanted to when we were talking about this a year ago, they wanted to get rid of Garoppolo. Now they ended up not being able to trade him, not being able to release him. They restructured his deal. He came back and had, accepted to being a backup, but they didn't want they wanted to give Trey Lance kind of a clean slate so that there weren't people going like, why aren't we bringing Garoppolo if Trey Lance as a young player was struggling, because Garoppolo's had success with the team. And so the same thing here is that you don't want, if Brock Purdy, if the league catches up to him a little bit or whatever, if there's some stumbling blocks or he's not 100% healthy, whatever it is, bring in Trey Lance. Like if you're like, hey, we found something in Brock Purdy and we have a veteran presence in Sam Darnold, if he's not healthy or if he struggles, then it does feel like for the good of Lance and for the good of the organization, you kind of gotta, it's the old saying, if you got two quarterbacks, you got none, right? You got to plant your flag and say Brock's our guy at some point.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to say, but Sam Darnold's almost too good to be a third-string quarterback, so that always didn't really make sense. Like, Sam Darnold was okay in Carolina,
right?
And he is a backup quarterback, I think, at worst in the league. And then, secondly, the Trey Lance San Francisco era has just never made any sense from the start. I remember a week or so before the draft, Mac Jones was like minus 500 to get taken by the Niners with pick 3. And then I don't know what happened because the whole thought was they were trading up to take Mac Jones. Mac Jones makes sense in the Shanahan system and everything like that. And then they just end up taking Trey Lance and he plays a couple games and now they're out on him. And it shakes up this draft as well.
Sure.
Because we're talking about Houston at 2, where it seems like the draft starts now and everyone's thinking, is it Levis or is it Stroud? Is it Lance? D'Amico Ryan's going to take Trey Lance with him to Houston?
That's a great point. And I was just about to ask you, if Trey Lance were coming out this year, where does he rank? I think at worst he ranks 3rd, right behind Stroud and Young.
Exactly. He'd be in the Richardson bucket of all tools, has not played enough, you better have a developmental plan. And so when you look at it like that, and here's the thing, he's younger than Will Levis and Hendon Hooker, who are in the draft this year. Trey Lance is younger than those guys. So some teams might see him as a ball of clay and say, we get this guy in, he stays healthy, we can mold him, and we're going to get him for pennies on the dollar.
Yep.
He's not going to. Trey Lance isn't getting a first-round pick back right now. Maybe he gets a 2. Maybe. I'm not even confident in that.
Wow.
So, I mean, there's value here for a team that is out, that doesn't get a quarterback in this draft, bringing Trey Lance in. Maybe Tennessee, maybe Houston, because Houston is not guaranteed to take 1 at 2 anymore. We're far away from that right now. So the Trey Lance conversation is fascinating in this offseason.
It really is, and it feels like that's the right move for both Lance and the 49ers. And so, you wish the kid well, but there's just no scenario. Here's the thing: they've gotten such a value out of Brock Purdy as a 7th round pick, as a day 3 pick, that they wouldn't be able to get any trade value for him. His upside as a starter for the next 5 years or next 4 years on a day 3 contract is astronomical. So they wouldn't be able to get that back in a trade. No one's trading for Brock Purdy, and giving them what. So if somebody has to, and obviously Sam Darnold is whatever. So if they're going to get anything out of that quarterback room, it feels like it has to be Trey Lance.
Yeah, and whatever they get for him as well, they're a team that they can absolutely win the Super Bowl this year, clearly. And so if you're just having this glut of quarterbacks just doesn't help them win the Super Bowl this year, naturally. And so they get something for Trey Lance, draft another player who's going to help this year. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, they don't have a first-round pick. They don't have a second-round pick. They pick at the end of the 3rd round, I believe, 3 times of the last 4 picks in that 3rd round. But one quarterback situation that could not have gone more perfectly is the Philadelphia Eagles, and they reward Jalen Hurts with a massive 5-year, $255 million contract extension. I mean, people thought the Eagles were crazy when they took Jalen Hurts in the 2nd round when they had Carson Wentz, and they took him at pick 53, and here we are.
People thought I was crazy when at the Hall of Fame game in my first appearance at NBC, I said he could make a Josh Allen-like leap this year. People thought that was crazy. People thought even making my fantasy ride or die, and people were like, well, yes, the rushing, but this guy might lose his job because he's not a franchise quarterback. Why didn't the Eagles draft a quarterback? They had a high pick. Why are they just going with Jalen Hurts and all they have is Gardner Minshew backing him up? Howie Roseman is crazy. There were a lot of naysayers around Jalen Hurts and the Eagles. I was not one of them. As you see the numbers there, just how good he's been, how much he's improved. 2nd year in Sirianni's system, adding A.J. Brown, getting Devontae Smith for a 2nd season. It's an unbelievable offensive line as well. All those things help. And you know what I'm doing right now?
Oh, no.
Connor Rodgers, oh
This
yeah.
is victory lap.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Let's do that. Let's do
Excellent
that.
camera work.
You're damn right I'm victory lapping. You're damn right. People doubted Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts made me look smart.
Do you get a cut of the
Fly,
255?
Eagles, fly. I might. Yeah. Jalen, if you could loan me a couple of those bucks so I could weasel my way into the Commander's ownership group, that would be amazing.
How about a rival team here for Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, I think, and it'll get a little bit glossed over because they lost the game, but Jalen Hurts in the Super Bowl was magnificent. He played Mahomes to a draw.
He really did. Like, the reason, people will talk about the one turnover, right? I mean, like, bad. And so, but, I mean, on the biggest stage, first time he'd ever played in the Super Bowl, to your point, like
playing hurt as well. Playing hurt.
The reason the Eagles lost that game is not Jalen Hurts.
He was a 10.
He's the reason they had a chance at the end.
Yep.
Unbelievable. We have Jalen up here somewhere, right?
Right there.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, exactly. There he is. Right there. Right. Yeah, it's a prime spot right behind me.
Yeah. Your vision's not as good as your running ability in circles. Yeah.
Fantastic. By the way, as bad as I look running,
out of breath.
As bad as I looked running, I'm not out of breath.
You're out of breath.
As bad as I looked running, by the way, I still could take more of a hit than Bryce Young.
There you go.
Oh boy, here we made it back here.
Bryce Young, real punching bag on the show.
Listen, I'm just saying. Like, again, I'm 6 foot 190-ish.
You got the black jacket.
Just
6'2" last time you were comparing yourself to Bryce.
Yeah, maybe I'm 200. I might be 200. It's been an off-season of fried chicken. But
it's a regular season of fried chicken. And a postseason of fried chicken too.
I like some fried chicken. What are you going to say? And drinking. I've been drinking. A
lot of celebrating going on. Commander's sale.
1,000%.
Jalen Hurts contract.
Jalen Hurts contract. I'm still employed.
Yes.
It's all
still
happening.
on the team.
I'm still on the team. It's all happening.
He's still on the team.
It's
Him
all
and Joe Mixon
happening.
still on the team. I'll tell you who's not on the team that he wants to play for, and that's Aaron Rodgers right now. Adam Schefter saying it doesn't sound like, that's an interesting way to frame it. It doesn't sound like Aaron Rodgers will be traded to the Jets before the NFL draft.
Your Jets.
My Jets.
Yeah, our Jets. What's going on here, Connor? Is he going to be on the Jets eventually? It just still seems like this is a formality, and it's just whatever. They're just badgering over compensation, but it's surely going to get done, right?
Yeah, this feels kind of like a signal to a certain side of saying, hey, we're really not going to move him unless you beef up the offer. And I think for Green Bay, I just don't understand how Green Bay goes into this draft without one of those top 50 picks from the Jets to help out Jordan Love. That doesn't make sense to me.
That's the weird part about the report is that, like, so if you're the Jets, what do you do going into the draft? You're like, okay, well, I guess we have to sort of assume that at the
they're operating that they're making all three of those picks. When you look at the visits they've had, but
they might be also going through the motions, whatever. You have to call their, are the Packers bluffing? We're bluffing, like that kind of stuff. But like at the moment, if the season started today, the starting quarterback of the Jets is Zach Wilson.
Don't rule out Tim Boyle.
Okay.
I'm going to rule out Tim Boyle. Ruled him out. Just put a line through. Write Tim Boyle's name.
Cross it out.
Yeah.
And then you're
put
rolling
a
him out.
line through Tim Boyle. Yeah, I just wrote his name and crossed it out.
There you go. Fantastic.
Yeah, that's it. That's what they got.
But what are the first three picks that the Jets have?
13, 42, 43.
They call San Francisco and say, take pick 43 for Trey Lance?
That would be. And Zach Wilson has to go back in that deal. You can't have Trey Lance and Zach Wilson on the same roster. But
picks 2 and 3 in the draft, back to back.
Then you roll in with Trey Lance in a win or get fired year.
I mean, right? I don't know. Like, I don't think that happens. But I'm just saying, like, I don't know.
What are the options for both of these sides?
Right.
Nobody can take on the Aaron Rodgers money.
Right.
And the Jets need a quarterback.
Yeah. And by the way, Aaron Rodgers has said publicly, he was on the Pat McAfee show saying, I want to play for the Jets. I've chosen to play for the Jets. I've come out of the darkness, and I'm a Jets guy now.
Yeah.
And so
it's like Jay Croucher.
Just like Jay Croucher. Yeah. Jay Croucher spent 4 days in the darkness.
And Sauce Gardner, Defensive Rookie of the Year, campaigning on Twitter every week. Yes.
And now Jets man.
What would you rather do? What would you rather do if I said next week you have to do one of two things?
Yeah.
4 days in the darkness, like Aaron Rodgers did on the darkness retreat, or another cross-country flight with your children?
Well, yeah, I was going to say that's the darkness retreat. It's not close. Yeah, it's not close.
I was praying for
4 hours. I was praying for 4 days in the darkness on that flight from Denver to LaGuardia. Absolutely praying for it. Now, with Rodgers, I do think if there was ever a candidate in human history to turn this into a soap opera and abandon the Jets and end up on like the Ravens or something weird, it would be Aaron Rodgers.
Absolutely.
Let me tell you.
He's got it in him. You know he's got it in him. But I still think this gets done the week
will
of the
get
draft.
done.
I think Green Bay needs an asset in this draft.
I mean, listen, Schefter's really plugged in,
Sure.
but yeah, it does. It just feels weird that it won't happen before the draft because I feel like both teams need to know what assets they have going into this draft, right? I mean, what they don't and they don't have. Like again, you can't unless the Packers call and say pick this guy for us. I don't.
Yeah, and that's just is not a precedent in the NFL. Like it doesn't work like that.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying.
Happens in the NBA, but
lot.
it doesn't happen in the NFL.
Yeah, it would be a new turning point in NFL draft history for.
And the other thing is as we just sort of talked about the locker room with Lance and Garoppolo and Brock Purdy and the whole thing. Like at some point you need to just basically like, yo, Jordan Love, this is your team.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like he can't. And I'm sure Jordan Love is preparing as if he's going to start the season and is trying to. But there's just something about as long as the guy's locker is still there, right? As long as you're going to camp and if you show up at Lambeau and there's a reporter going like, "Hey, have you heard anything new about 12?" Like, I don't know. Like
I wouldn't
you
put
want
past
your
Rodgers
guy,
to
you
show
want your
up.
guy to be the guy. You want your guy to be the guy.
Yep.
You know what I mean? If you're the Packers, you need to empower Jordan Love to be like, "Hey, we used an early pick on you. We need to see what we have. We need to give you a chance to really be the guy for us moving forward here."
Yep.
Moving over to the running backs, Austin Ekeler said his worst case scenario is returning to the Chargers to play out the final year of his contract, Jay. Ekeler, it doesn't appear the Chargers have much interest in tacking on extension years as he gets closer to 30. Ekeler not happy with his pay, justifiably so. Doesn't really seem like there's a clear end in sight with this ordeal.
No, it doesn't. But at the same time, I mean, I think that he said it, like he may go back to the Chargers. Maybe he'll hold out. We'll see what happens there. But I would think that worst case scenario for him is he's back and he's going to provide amazing fantasy value in terms for our purposes. But yeah, it's not a great situation for Austin Ekeler. As you can see, in terms of the highest paid running backs, feels like Austin Ekeler should make more than Naheem Hines.
Exactly.
I'm sure that
I mean,
he
that's a
feels-
low bar to clear. Right, exactly.
He feels that way as well. He should probably make more than Joe Mixon and Aaron Jones, I would say. So
He should be in that mix. He should be making 12 plus million a year.
yeah,
Easy.
And he's making half of that at the moment. So yeah, it's an awkward situation, but suspect that he'll be on the field and doing Austin Ekeler stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's but it doesn't feel like the Chargers are motivated to trade him. So it does feel like I do feel like his only leverage at this point will be a holdout. Because, I mean, they've said, yeah, sure, go ahead, knock yourself out, try to find a trade. But, and maybe after the draft goes and some of the running back needy teams don't get what they want, so maybe, but just feels like much of the NFL is kind of in a, running backs are just guys kind of thing, like, and they're not willing to pay up for the position. And so feels like running back's best chance to get paid is usually from their own team that realizes how valuable. If the Chargers aren't willing to pony up, this could be, I feel like this is going to get uglier before it gets better.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation around just running back value, because in terms of how running backs affect the line, remember a couple of years ago when Jonathan Taylor was having his all-world season for the Colts, and Jonathan Taylor, if he was out, he'd move the line 1.5 points, whereas Carson Wentz came out and it looked like he was going to miss that game late season against the Raiders with COVID, and the line moved a touchdown because the drop-off from Carson Wentz at that point to Sam Ehlinger was literally a touchdown. Like, quarterbacks are just so much more valuable. Derrick Henry, when he broke his foot suddenly and came out of the game against the Rams, the line moved like a half point. The one thing, though, with running backs is when you can add value in the passing game, like Christian McCaffrey is insanely valuable despite being a running back. Austin Ekeler provides a significant amount of value because of his work in the passing game. When you have that dual threat, that makes you like a wide receiver.
The Chargers, if they didn't have Austin Ekeler last year, the Chargers season is a disaster. I know the season didn't go the way they wanted to it last year, but at least they were competitive for the majority of the year. They would not. It would have been a disaster after they had so many injuries, and the one and Herbert got banged up as well, and he was inconsistent. Like the one positive, the one constant of the Chargers offense last year was Austin Ekeler.
Yep.
Yeah, to me, the solution should be if they can tack on maybe an extra $1 or $2 to this year, and he gets a stipulation he can't be franchise tagged after the year. That kind of feels like each side wins a little bit. And Ekeler, we know how good he is. He will get paid in a year, despite being a running back closer to 30. his pass catching skills will age well.
Let's get him above Nyheim Hines.
Yeah,
Come on,
yeah,
Elliott.
that's.
Come on.
I would
The
feel the
Nyheim
same way.
Hines line. It's kind of the Mendoza line of running back contracts. Like,
Sorry, Nyheim.
come on, let's go. Sorry, Nyheim. Yeah.
More running back news. Robert Saleh said Breece Hall looks fantastic, and Rich Samini writes that Hall is expected to be ready for Week 1, guys. I think expected to be ready is a little different from the Breece Hall you're drafting in the first or second round to be an RB1, but still a good sign for Breece Hall out of the gate.
Before he tore his ACL in Denver, I was thinking, because just before that, I think he broke off like a 70-yard touchdown run. It was his best moment as a pro, and then obviously,
his worst moment. Yeah.
Extremely unfortunate what happened. But at that point, I was thinking in my head, like, is this guy going to be the number 1 pick in fantasy like next year? He was playing at that level, and look, I don't think he's going to get back to that level immediately from Week 1, but he is a guy who by mid-season next year, we could be talking about him as the best running back in football.
I think he's going to be a value. I mean, the concerns of running backs coming off ACLs is that they just don't have that spark, that breakaway. We saw it with Saquon Barkley. Like he just wasn't the same explosive guy the year after he tore his ACL. He's still out there plodding along. So the question becomes on Breece Hall is just like where his ADP ultimately winds up landing in August, especially if we get close, because I think he'll be good, and we expect, assuming Rodgers is under center, we expect the Jets' offense to be a lot better and in scoring position more often. So he may have less explosive plays, but more touchdowns just because it's a better offense, and that you can't crowd the box the way you could with some of the other quarterbacks that the Jets had when you've got Aaron Rodgers. But yes, I agree with you in the sense that, like, great news to have Breece Hall back out there, but I think we're probably a year away from seeing the Breece Hall that broke off that 70-yard run that you're talking about.
And I think Adrian Peterson kind of skewed everyone's perceptions around ACL injuries because he came back and won MVP the next year, but he was clearly just a freak, and it's not the norm to be able to do that.
He is a genetic freak of nature, Adrian Peterson. Like, he's just one of him, like Lawrence Taylor, there's guys that are just
Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry should be done. He should be done, and he's just
Derrick Henry is a genetic freak of nature. Like, they're just not built the same way that other people are.
Our last bit of running
Other
back
mortals, I should say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Our last bit of running back news. Vikings GM Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah was asked about Dalvin Cook being on the roster this season, and his quote was, "Conversations are always ongoing with him." Is that our news still on the team?
Yeah.
Conversations are ongoing?
Always ongoing.
Always.
I like that.
Always ongoing.
Just the simmering group chat with Dalvin. It's always kind of ticking. Always people typing.
Always ongoing. I mean, I do hear from NBC quite often, I will say.
Conversations
are always ongoing between me and Peacock. The problem is that if he gets released after June 1st, it saves the Vikings nearly $11 million, right? He's got a $14.1 million cap hit in 2023. And to your point about sort of, running backs not really moving the line, over the past couple of years when Dalvin Cook has missed time due to injury, Alexander Mattison has stepped in and been basically just as good. The offense hasn't really suffered without Dalvin Cook. And so when you sort of look at the finances of it, and the fact is that they're going to have to pay Justin Jefferson here pretty soon. They're paying a ton of money to Kirk Cousins. They've got some other guys coming
Danielle
up.
Hunter's not happy right now.
Exactly.
They're
Hunter,
figure that out again.
They got to pay Hunter. It doesn't seem like there's a scenario that makes sense for Cook to stay on the Vikings unless he actively says, "Hey, I'll take less money to stay here. I will restructure my deal. I'm happy to," and just doesn't feel like that's going to do it. But that's the money thing, and the fact that there's not much of a downgrade if you get to Alexander Mattison. Sorry. Then you add in the fact that there have been off the field concerns, allegations, not just injuries, but there've been off the field allegations made against Dalvin as well that I can't speak to the veracity of it, but that's a headache. You don't want to deal with that either. You know what I mean? And so it feels like it's not if, it's a matter of when Dalvin Cook's not on the Vikings. And if that were to be the case, assuming that's the case, Alexander Mattison is a borderline top 10 running back this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Easy. And when Dalvin Cook has come out, the betting line doesn't move. If Dalvin Cook's on a new team, Minnesota's win total will not move. Alexander Mattison, from everything we've seen, is at least the same tier of running back, I think, in terms of talent as Dalvin Cook, and he'll have a huge fantasy value if he's the guy.
Moving over to wide receivers, I know you'll love this one, Barry. The Steelers acquired wide receiver Allen Robinson and a 7th-round pick from the Rams for a 7th-round pick.
I'm hearing that he might be a ride or die next year.
Allen Robinson.
Yeah.
I
wrote an entire, I just want to say this right here. I've asked and answered this. You know how sometimes in court, badgering the witness, Your Honor, badgering the witness, asked and answered?
Yeah.
That's what this is. I've done my mea culpa on Allen Robinson. I wrote an entire column. It's up for free on rotoworld.com or NBCSportsEdge.com. Go check it out. It was like week 4 or 5, where I waved the white flag and I said, I apologize. This was a massive mistake. I'm sorry to everyone that drafted him, and that includes myself because I drafted him on a decent amount of teams last year. Look, I've always really liked Allen Robinson as a player and maybe just a new situation, but fantasy value, you can't draft this guy.
The worst situation to go to as well.
Right. I mean, so he downgrades from Stafford. Even a banged-up Stafford last year is still better than what we expect Kenny Pickett to be this year on what will be, at best, a balanced offense, potentially run heavy, but at best a balanced offense, right? I mean, Kenny Pickett last year had the 2nd lowest passer rating among qualified quarterbacks last year. You think about, they've got Deontay Johnson. They've got George Pickens, who we expect a lot of things for a year or two. Pat Freiermuth.
It's a lot of targets between those three right there.
Right, exactly. Yeah. On an offense that wasn't exactly, crushing it. And a team that's in a division with the Bengals, Ravens, and Browns, 3 good defenses that they're going to face 6 times next year. And so I can't. I saw something that said that maybe Robinson moves to the slot full time and he could play that big slot role that Chase Claypool played some last year, which I think makes sense as a way to use him. But in terms of consistent fantasy value, I can't see it unless there's just a massive injury to one of the 3 guys we talked about.
Yeah. Now he's the 4th pass-catching option on a team where, Pickens, I think, kind of underwhelmed relative to expectations. Deontay Johnson underwhelmed because of the lack of touchdowns, and now he's going to be behind both of those guys in an offense that's not. Kenny Pickett's not throwing the ball 42 times a game. They're not going to be throwing that much. It hasn't been a particularly creative offensive scheme either. And if Sean McVay can't get anything out of Allen Robinson, when he's opposite Cooper Kupp, by the way, because Robinson's performances with Kupp when he was healthy weren't good either. So, yeah, it just feels like a mess all around.
He just can't generate separation anymore, Allen Robinson. And that's kind of the end all.
Well, and here's the thing. I mean, we don't need to do a deep dive on Allen Robinson. But what I would say is it's and I don't think I'm okay with him not being able to generate separation because he's a big-bodied guy. But what he needs is when you're a player like that, when you're a player that can't generate separation, what you need is you need a quarterback that trusts you'll win a 50-50 ball, that he'll body the guy out and he's just going to come down with it. And just is Kenny Pickett at this stage of his career the kind of quarterback that's going to trust a brand new player? It's one thing to be okay, Larry Fitzgerald, I know you can't get separation, but I don't care. You're Larry Fitzgerald. I'm going to throw it somewhere near you, and I know you're going to come down with it, right? Allen Robinson, just again, to your point, he's at best the 4th passing option on a team that isn't going to throw very much with a young quarterback.
Yep.
This next one.
It's a bigger name than any kind of fantasy value.
This next one more for the dynasty crowd and a bit of a surprise. Tyreek Hill said he plans to retire after the 2025 season. Essentially, Tyreek Hill has said, when my contract's up, I'm done. That's, for a great wide receiver in the NFL, that's always a little surprising to hear, to put a timeline on it.
Yeah, I feel like people say this kind of stuff all the time, don't they? Isn't Aaron Donald going to retire? I mean, let's ask Tyreek Hill in 2025 how he feels, because then he's very likely going to have a big contract offer at that point in front of him. Let's see how he feels like turning down the money.
It's easy to say something after a couple of years, I'm going to, and then, another $100 million contract staring you in the face. That's tough.
Yeah.
I sort of
kind of shrug. We'll see. It's also so far away.
It's so far away, and the Dolphins, 2024, the Dolphins losing the AFC Championship game, and they feel like they're they're on the verge. I mean, I know Hill's got a Super Bowl ring, but still, I don't.
I would back -500 that Tyreek Hill's playing in the NFL in 2026. I'm not going to take Tyreek Hill at his word here. Let's see you turn down the money, Tyreek.
In more transaction news, the Ravens signed Odell Beckham Jr., obviously formerly of the Rams, to a 1-year contract, up to $18 million. It's good money for Odell. I believe 15 of it's guaranteed, over a $13 million signing bonus. This was was very surprising.
Very surprising for a lot of reasons. Very surprising because the Ravens as a organization are usually not the guys that do crazy free agent moves. Like they're a really disciplined and smart front office. They really are. So it's surprising on that level. It's also surprising given like they don't know who their quarterback is, right? I mean, like, and so like there's a scenario in which they've got like we're starting over, and so to sign a guy, coming off a major injury on the wrong side of 30, what is he, 32? Like this feels weird, especially given, by the way, if they do have Lamar back, then like they're going to be more run heavy. Having said all of that, he is a very famous player. He's a very popular player. He will put butts in the seats, and maybe it's a twofold thing. Maybe we're playing checkers and they're playing chess. Maybe the thought process is twofold. If we lose Lamar, at least we've got a star. At least fans aren't coming out for Tyler Huntley or whoever we have back there. Like, so at least we have like a big famous player that will put butts in the seats, right? And oh, by the way, we still want Lamar back. We want to make a deal with Lamar. So hey, Lamar, look, we went out and got you Odell Beckham Jr. Right? It's no longer throwing to the James Prochet's of the world.
Watkins
Sammy Watkins, James Prochet's, Devin Duvernay's, whatever, DeMarcus Robinson's. We got you OBJ. So maybe it's twofold, right? It's a positive way to try to get Lamar back to the table and try to figure out a long-term solution with him. And if nothing else, it's a safety net to give them some star power. For our purposes, this is a big kind of like, listen, I know he was good with the Rams, but that was a couple of years ago. There are targets available, but the passing game still is going to go through Mark Andrews. We don't know who this quarterback is. He's coming off of a major injury. It's been a long time. It's been over a year since we've seen him on a football field. I think he is likely to go higher in drafts than I'm willing to take him just because of his name, because he's OBJ, but I just don't know that the fantasy production is going to be there. Remember, and some of this is based on personnel, but no team in the NFL last year had fewer wide receiver targets and yards last year than the Baltimore Ravens. They were literally 32nd in the NFL in this stat, and so, again, they had James Prochet and Devin Duvernay, and so Beckham will command some targets. I just don't know that he's going to command the kind of targets that justify where he's likely to go in ADP.
Yeah, this signing is shocking to me because I think the Ravens, if you're talking about best run organizations, at least from my viewpoint in the cheap seats, it'd be like Ravens and Eagles. They're right there.
Right there.
And this signing makes no sense relative to value. So it makes me think that Lamar is coming back, that this is like an Alan Lazard type of signing. The fact that Lamar is on FaceTime with OBJ and they're posting that on social media, that OBJ is saying Lamar was part of the courting process. If Lamar doesn't come back to the Ravens now, it would just seem absurd. So I think this is good news for Mark Andrews dynasty managers, because it seems like Lamar is probably going to come back at this point. And with OBJ, we're just guessing, because last time we saw him, he was the best player in the Super Bowl until he tore his ACL. He also tore his ACL and he's on the wrong side of 30, and he wasn't a number one wide receiver when he went down, even at that point. So I think we're just guessing, but there's scope, there's upside, but it's not going to outweigh his name.
We've said this before, that we think, if we had to place a bet as to where Lamar Jackson plays football this year, we still think Baltimore is the favorite. But Lamar wants his money, and it may be one thing like, come to Baltimore, but I don't know how close Lamar Jackson and Odell Beckham Jr. are. They may be thick as thieves. They may be just friendly. I don't know the nature of the relationship, but I don't care how close they are. If, he's not giving up $50 million, if he thinks he's worth $250 and, the Ravens are only offering $200 million, you're not giving up $50 million in your mind to play with a buddy.
Yep.
Yeah, it doesn't move the needle that much.
I'm just, that's what I'm saying. Yes. I don't know where Lamar. I can't obviously speak to where Lamar's mind is and where his real number is and where the Ravens are. We just don't know. You hear numbers thrown around. Who knows what's true and what isn't? I'm just saying, he's still got to get paid. He's still got to get paid what he wants.
Moving over to the Cowboys, Calvin Watkins of the Dallas Morning News writes that Cowboys coach Mike McCarthy has told Michael Gallup he will be featured more. This is a team that has traded for Brandon Cooks, who we believe will play plenty in the slot and outside. They have CeeDee Lamb. Michael Gallup fitting into the equation as a feature feels like a stretch to me, fellas.
So Mike McCarthy also said he wants to run the ball more this year. and don't put it past the Cowboys to do something crazy like draft Bijan Robinson after franchise tagging Tony Pollard. Like, this is an off-season quote that I'm just sort of like, okay, sure. But for our purposes, it doesn't, like, I still think you're drafting CeeDee Lamb as a number 1 wide receiver, and I would prefer Cooks to Gallup going into this year in terms of where you're drafting Cowboys wide receivers. And I don't know that offense is going to pass enough to support 3 fantasy-relevant wide receivers week in, week out.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd love Gallup if Cooks wasn't there.
Yeah.
Because Gallup, I mean, never really looked right coming off the injury. And I think we spoke to CeeDee Lamb on the show about it at one point, and
friend
he was
of the
saying
show,
that,
CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, Eights, as you call him
our buddy
affectionately.
Eights.
Yeah, you're good friends with CeeDee Lamb. But the fact that Cooks is now there and Gallup is still hasn't shown it. Still hasn't shown that he's all the way back, that he was the guy who, for 2 years in a row was getting over 100 targets, was on pace for 100 targets before his injury as well in 2021. So he's clearly got the talent, but now it's just a question of he's going to be a number 3 on an offense that runs the ball and also has a 1 who is one of the best wide receivers in the sport. So it's just difficult for Gallup to really get to value.
We talked about the Chargers because of Austin Eckler's lingering contract situation, but on the pass catcher side of things, ESPN's Jordan Reed believes the Chargers are adamant about taking a pass catcher in the early rounds of 2023 NFL Draft. I found this interesting because you hear pass catcher and you think, well, they'll take a wide receiver, but you also don't rule out the likes of the top of this tight end class for the Chargers as well. So I think it's pretty clear the Chargers are going to look to add more weapons for Justin Herbert.
As well they should, and we'll see sort of how they do it. Listen, getting Jalen Guyton back would be great. But again, Mike Williams has struggled with a lot of injuries. Keenan Allen, also on the wrong side of 30, feels like they've got a young franchise quarterback, and so supporting that, like, they're only going to go as far as Justin Herbert can take them, and the more weapons you can give Justin Herbert, the better. Yeah,
they need a vertical element to that offense, which we talked about with Austin Ekeler at length, and the fact that Guyton wasn't there and Mike Williams was constantly banged up just meant that offense, it's like it had no three-point shooting, and I think they'll surely add that.
But they haven't, but to your point, like, Everett was involved, and so, could Michael Mayer go there? Like, it's just, it'd be interesting to see, it'd be interesting if they took a tight, that'd be a good landing spot for one of these really nice tight ends.
Yep.
Other notable wide receiver updates, Jay, anything notable here? The Chargers re-signed Jalen Guyton. The Chiefs signed Richie James after he put together a nice year for the Giants. And the Dolphins signed wide receiver, now Chosen Anderson. That was formerly Robbie Anderson.
Why are you laughing, Connor?
One-year contract. What do you think, Jay? You change?
Richie, I got no comments or really
Croucher.
Feelings about Chosen Croucher. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that really goes quite as well.
Do you think he chose that name?
Oh boy.
After the character Chosen from Cobra Kai?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. No. He did it after the LeBron James tattoo on his back.
Okay.
Richie James will certainly have a moment with the Kansas City Chiefs, and he will headline one of our waiver wire shows, no doubt, at some point. Richie James. Maybe he won't even be on waiver wires because the Chiefs are a little bit thin on wide receivers.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, there's been some off-season hype videos between Patrick Mahomes throwing some dimes to Justin Ross. So hope springs eternal for him. If you're on the field with Patrick Mahomes, good things can happen, but it does feel like it's going to really be Mahomes and Kelsey this year once again.
Yeah.
We'll see with Sky Moore. I could see Kadarius Toney having consistent value. Like he's the guy that's the most interesting to me of the non-Kelsey Chiefs pass catchers right now. But certainly you'll see Richie James, who's like a slot guy. I feel like I'm the only guy at this table that has seen Cobra Kai.
No, I've seen Cobra Kai.
I haven't seen Cobra Kai.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I got it.
All right.
He didn't like it, I guess.
He didn't.
No reaction. I would have assumed he didn't watch it.
Yeah, thank you.
No, I was just making an objective statement. I don't think that was the reason for the artist formerly known as Robbie Anderson.
It's the only person I know named Chosen. There's a character on Cobra Kai named Chosen. He's kind of a badass, by the way.
Okay.
Don't you think?
Maybe Robbie will have a big year then. Chosen.
I feel like because Chosen comes in later in the series. I think he comes in like season 4 or 5.
Okay, I didn't get there.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. So you have it right.
Well, I don't even have to watch it anymore.
Yeah.
Well,
why are you ruining stuff?
I know the whole story.
You want to ruin what happened in Succession 2 episodes ago?
No, I don't want to do that. Okay. But I'm just saying, I'm not there on Succession yet either. So don't ruin anything for me, ruiner.
Yeah.
But no, like just the fact that a character shows up named Chosen is not ruining anything for
Okay.
Cobra Kai.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
By the way, Cobra Kai's awesome.
I'll tell you what we can't ruin on this week's show,
Let's
guys.
sweep the leg.
That would be Sunday, week 2 of the USFL, as it continues with more hard-hitting action as the New Jersey Generals take on the Pittsburgh Maulers Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on NBC and Peacock.
The Maulers is a great name.
That's
for
a really good football
The
name.
Pittsburgh Maulers is that's a great name for a franchise.
Yeah.
You know, listen,
The Utah Jazz should take that name. Get rid of Jazz.
Utah
Maulers.
Yeah, Utah Maulers. Fantastic. It's way better. The Utah, obviously Salt Lake City known for its jazz scene.
Generals
more known
is a
for its
little-
mauling scene.
It's not known for its mauling either.
Well, equivalent.
By default, do you have to root for the Generals, like Commanders, Generals? Is that like the bucket of football that you root for?
I feel like.
Well, you do root for the
New
Aggies,
Jersey
so that doesn't
Generals.
really
I mean, I'm a
match.
little all over the place.
Yeah.
I'm a little all over the place.
Yeah, you're an Angels fan.
Yeah.
Angels, Lakers, Commanders.
But I could go through why I root
I
for
know.
each team that I do. I haven't really planted my flag yet on the USFL. Who my USFL
For sale.
team is.
Maulers are a front runner. It's a
I
good
do
name.
like the name.
It is strange that you came in today wearing a Crystal Palace jersey. That was a little bit weird. Yeah.
Zaha.
Yeah,
Zaha,
there you
I
go.
mean,
Look at
I
you.
am. Listen,
Love Zaha.
look, everyone knows Sixers, Devils, Crystal Palace. Those are my teams. Those are my teams.
Oh, man.
Mr. Harris.
When you're part of the Josh Harris group, you have to support the whole
Get in
team.
the line.
I'm all on board.
Yeah, fall in line.
I'm all in.
We'll find a way in.
I am trying to. Yeah.
All right, guys, a little mock draft time.
Okay.
I wrote my first mock draft for
Congratulations.
Roto World, NBC Sports. That's just a big accomplishment.
Yeah,
Yes.
congratulations.
Yeah,
Nice job.
It's- yes.
Connor Rodgers is available now for free.
For free.
NBCSportsEdge.com, RotoWorld.com. Your mock draft, and this is now. Are you calling? So is this based on? Let me ask you this.
This is
When you
predicting.
this is predicting. This is not based on what you would do.
Correct.
This is basically talking to your sources, talking to all the people. You've done this for years and years and years for Bleacher Report. Now you're over here doing it for us. So this is predicting, and let's go through the first, the number 1 pick at Carolina. Who do you have them taking?
Yeah, Bryce Young. I mean, pretty chalk here. This has moved, I think, minus 500 now, Jay.
I think it's
it might
minus
be off the board.
5,000.
Yeah, it's probably off the board at this point. It has really gone like crazy. So Bryce Young, number 1 to Carolina. I think that's where they land. Number 2 is the one I wrote this mock draft. We weren't on the air last week. Things have changed. CJ Stroud going there, that's where everything has started to change. I've heard 50-50 the Texans could take a defensive player like Tyree Wilson that you see at 3 there. So the Texans can really change this entire draft. But I think what's interesting here, guys, of course, is the quarterback conversation, especially Anthony Richardson at 4. You have Shane Steichen coming over from the Eagles, and you wonder what he can do with Richardson's development, not just throwing the deep ball, but, of course, on the ground rushing as well.
Right. Obviously, what he did last year with Jalen Hurts, speaks volume there. They do have Gardner Minshew, and there's a number of veterans out there that they could also probably grab, and if they wanted to give it a development year for Richardson, that's the most interesting one. The other thing that's really interesting here is what happened. No one, I think, in the world is rooting harder for the Texans not to take C.J. Stroud than the Arizona Cardinals, because if C.J. Stroud is there at 3, the Arizona Cardinals are like, all right, someone trade me their team.
They're begging right now. That's
Right.
the thing I've heard for 2 weeks is that they right now don't believe they can get out of the pick, but that's the variable. If the Texans take Tyree Wilson or Will Anderson and C.J. Stroud is there, the Colts are sitting there at 4, and everybody's like, can I get ahead of the Colts and get C.J. Stroud? And who that team would be is the big variable as well. Is that
Right. Could it be Tennessee?
Tennessee? There's really not a ton of options for teams to come up because they don't want to go that far back.
Tampa needs a quarterback.
Tampa's the one that makes the most sense to come up for a quarterback if they weren't at 19.
Yes.
They're just in no man's land
But
in the draft.
And I know Seattle's got Geno Smith, but they actually can get out of that deal after 1
1
year.
year.
So could Seattle do that? Could Detroit? I know they believe in Jared Goff, but I don't know.
Yeah, those teams are in play. I think.
But it feels like Tennessee would be the most likely
Yes.
team to try to make a big move like that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And I've heard that the Cardinals, they have Tyree Wilson as the number 1 defensive player on their board, and
I've
even
heard,
if Will Anderson is there, they're going to take Tyree Wilson at 3 if they can't get out of the pick. But to me, the draft begins at 2, and the whole question that the whole draft is going to pivot around is, are the Texans actually not going to take a quarterback? Because now there's more and more swirling that people are saying that the Texans aren't as high as C.J. Stroud, and there is obviously the elephant in the room there is that C.J. Stroud and Deshaun Watson have the same agent,
Exactly.
which is absolutely going to play a role. And so now it's looking more and more like they might take Will Levis at number 2 if they take a quarterback. I don't think anyone knows, to your point earlier, Connor, about what's happening with Anthony Richardson and where he's going to go.
He's a bit of the wild card right
Yeah.
now, and it's because of all the dominoes, right? When you look at it, the Texans are such a domino spot, like you said, Jay, where are they going to get really cute with this and try to move from 12 back up for a quarterback? Well, if you like a quarterback, you don't do that. Rule of thumb of scouting in the NFL. You just take him when he's there. So that kind of goes back. If they like Will Levis, just they don't care what the outside opinions are. They could take him at 2.
Do you think the talent of Stroud and Levis and Richardson is such that it would be malpractice for the Texans to take a defensive player at 2?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Now, here's the timelines question, right? For DeMeco Ryans, no. DeMeco Ryans' first year there. DeMeco Ryans needs pass rush for his defense to work. You hired him for his defense to work. You're in a weaker division. For Nick Caserio, this is his last draft, in my opinion, if he doesn't take a quarterback. I don't see how they pass on quarterback again, have a great year 1 with Davis Mills under center or whatever it may be.
Surely you can't go into year 3 of Davis Mills. Like, that's my thing. I just think the Texans have to take a quarterback.
I think they have to.
Yeah.
And I think there's a little heat from an owner there saying, I'm tired of not having this answered since we traded Deshaun Watson. So I think ultimately they will take one. It's a matter of how they operate that board, and the Stroud question is the biggest one because there's a gap from Stroud down to Richardson, down to Levis.
Yeah.
But relationships matter in the NFL, and there's a very real fractured one there with how things ended with Deshaun Watson.
And there is no chance, there's no chance that the Panthers take Stroud.
I wouldn't put it at
There's
no
always a chance, but conventional wisdom is that they're taking Bryce Young.
Yes, it would feel very Baker Mayfield going number 1 the day before the draft when Sam Darnold was there for weeks. That's what that would feel like to me.
Yep.
We were all pretty shocked when that came down in
Yes.
the last 24 hours.
Yep. My expectation now, and you can bet on this at BetMGM in terms of picks 2, 3, 4 in the draft. I think that Bryce Young will go 1. I think Will Levis will go 2 because I think they'll take a quarterback, and they seem to have cooled on C.J. Stroud, which I think will be the wrong pick. But I think that Levis will go 2, which seems insane, but it seems like he is the number 1 quarterback on their board. I think Tyree Wilson will go 3 if Arizona can't trade the pick. And then 4, the Colts will have a decision between Stroud and Richardson. And all common sense would dictate Stroud, but who knows? It seems like Stroud may actually fall, despite the fact that 2 weeks ago or whatever, he was minus 400 to go number 1, and now he might not even go in the top 4.
You know, and I'll say this,
crazy.
off that conversation, the year that Josh Allen was in the draft, and the Colts were not in the quarterback market that year, they traded their 3rd overall pick to the Jets. But I know Chris Ballard loved Josh Allen, and when you look at Anthony Richardson, he is the all-traits prospect of he could do it all. He could throw it a mile, he could run, he just needs to play more, he needs more refinement. So if you go by Ballard's history of what he likes, he is a guy that wants to swing for the fences.
Josh Allen's a great comp. I was actually having this conversation with a friend on the way in, and my friend was asking me where I thought about Richardson. And I actually said, I hadn't even seen your mock draft yet, and I said, I thought the Colts made the most sense. And, my friend was anti him and just said, Richardson just says, I don't know, whatever, 56% completion percentage in college or whatever it was. I said, by the way, Josh Allen's completion percentage in college was awful. Like, if you look at all the scouting on Josh Allen coming out, it was just like big physical guy, can throw in a mile, obviously can run, but no, huge accuracy issues. And by the way, he played at Wyoming. Look at the competition. And now obviously Josh Allen is like the best quarterback in football, right? Or one of the top 3 guys. And so I sort of feel that way with Anthony Richardson. There's a lot of stuff you can coach in the NFL. What you can't coach is what that guy has. And that guy's just got, again, genetic freak of nature.
That's what it comes down to.
He's just a physical, incredible. He's an incredible physical guy.
It's not going to happen, but I would give serious consideration to taking him 1 because he's got surely the highest ceiling of any quarterback. And when you're picking 1, you're picking ceiling. Bryce is the best prospect in terms of his median outcome, I think, but Richardson might have the better ceiling.
I'm currently doing a dynasty mock draft of rookies, a Superflex dynasty mock draft with a bunch of experts in the field, and for Dynasty League Football, which is a dynasty site, a really good one, by the way. And anyway, and so I had the number 2 pick. Bijan Robinson went number 1. So it's Dynasty Superflex, where you play 2 quarterbacks. I took Richardson. I could have taken any of them. I just thought, again, for fantasy football, like who's got the most upside? In theory, this is so it's a dynasty mock draft. Like Anthony Richardson could be, has Josh Allen Lamar Jackson. Like, he's got that kind of upside. He's got that ceiling.
Absolutely. Speaking of Bijan Robinson, where'd you have him going on your mock?
Down the board, and I even wrote in the mock draft. I have him at 28 to the Bengals, right? And we've talked about the Joe Mixon situation. Yeah. But I did write in the mock draft, I ultimately think Bijan will be taken earlier than this by a team trading up or back in from the second round. You do the exercise, and you're like, I just can't find that place for him earlier, but I know he's not making it to 28 because he's a top 5 player in the draft. As we get closer here, though, guys, the conversation we opened the show earlier the show today, the Chargers' future with Austin Ekeler, the Vikings' future with Dalvin Cook, if those teams get there and Bijan Robinson's sitting there and they go, we have him as a top 5 player, we don't have our long-term future at running back set, he could also play in the slot. Bijan flexes out, he does everything. I mean, I wouldn't rule out the Chargers, I wouldn't rule out the Vikings, and once again, a team trading up. Bijan's going earlier than this, but the dream fit, of course, would be the Bengals at 28.
It'd be incredible. I mean, just again, especially assuming Mixon moves on to another team, like Bijan Robinson going to a great offense like that, an explosive offense. Bijan Robinson on the Bengals is a top 5 overall fantasy pick to me.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And right now, in terms of the market, he's favored to go to the Falcons, which seems very high at 8, and it's plus 200, so it's not like pencil him in there, but they're the favorite right now. And I mean, that I think would be a great fantasy fit as well, just with their commitment to running the ball.
Yes, massive commitment to running the ball, and that feels weird. But then again, listen, they drafted one of the best blocking tight ends in with Kyle Pitts
at what, 3, 4?
At 4,
yeah,
fourth overall, blocking
fourth overall to make him a blocking tight end. It does feel weird. It does feel like, and I made this joke before, but it does feel like the front office of the Falcons and what the coaching staff want to do are that they never talk to each other. Yes. They're on opposite sides of the building. They maybe not even have each other's phone numbers.
Yeah.
Because here you go. Here's Drake London. Here's Kyle Pitts. I'm going to run the ball.
Yeah. And it's funny because I feel like the Falcons have drafted reasonably well with those picks, and the coaching staff has done a good job. But overall, it's just they're not interacting whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, look, Arthur Smith did as annoying as it was for fantasy managers of Kyle Pitts, the fact of the matter is he got the most out of that team. Like he's like, this is how I'm going to compete with no quarterback. I'm just going to, they grinded out some wins. You know what I mean? Like, they competed. So I agree with you. I thought Arthur Smith, as frustrating as it was for us as Kyle Pitts managers, like, I thought from an NFL perspective, he did a really nice job last year.
Yep.
It just doesn't seem in concert with what they're doing in the draft and how they're building this team.
Yep.
So we'll quickly run through picks 11 through 20 here. We talked enough about Will Levis. He falls to the Titans at 11 here. I think he goes earlier than that, as Jay hinted to.
You have JSN at the
that's
at
the most fantasy relevant one to me. Yeah.
Right, and you have him as the first wide receiver off the board.
Yeah.
Now, you can't bet on draft props in every state, Jay, but there are some states that will do it. What are the odds on JSN being the first wide receiver off the board?
Yep, so at BetMGM, he's minus 275. Right. So that's basically
I think he should
done.
be minus 500.
Okay, that's a good bet. Yeah. Throw in some parlays. Boost those odds.
Yeah.
I like
so
it.
That
so JSN,
one,
that's done.
Dalton Kincaid, pass-catching tight end of the Lions. That would be a really, really good landing spot for him. That would be a rare rookie fantasy tight end that should finish as a top 10 tight end in the fantasy landscape. That's what that
rookie tight ends tend to struggle.
Yeah.
There's very few rookie tight ends that have ever had top 10 seasons as rookies. Evan Ingram, his year did because he was literally the only guy left in New York because they had so many massive injuries. Gronk's rookie year, fueled by touchdowns, he got into the top 10. But generally speaking, it is rare that a rookie tight end gets in the top 10. Having said that, though, we've seen how much that offense, Ben Johnson's offense, used T.J. Hawkinson. They sort of had a tight end by committee, whatever. Didn't Zylstra have 3 touchdowns at one point this year, like in one game? But so I do agree with you that if Dalton Kincaid went to Detroit, that would be pretty interesting given how high we are on that particular offense. Zay Flowers, did we get to – let's –
Yes, Flowers at 20 to Seattle, and we saw this offense. We saw this offense when Tyler Lockett was hurt last year. They just needed another guy for him and DK Metcalf for Geno to throw the ball to. He goes to that offense. He's 5'9". He moves really, really well. He's going to play in the slot at the next level, even though he played inside outside in college. Seattle needs that number 3 wide receiver, and I think it's something they're looking at 20.
I feel like we've just said that every single year, though.
I know.
mean, I just feel like that's where number 3 wide receivers go to die.
Yeah.
There's so many guys over the years that they have drafted.
Eskridge.
He
was a second-round pick.
D. Eskridge is a great example, but literally, for years, it's just always been Lockett and Metcalf.
Yep.
By the way, I agree with your pick. I do know that the Commanders are very high on Joey Porter in the secondary. Wouldn't be surprised to see them go that route. I know he had a visit with them. He's visited a lot of teams. A lot of teams like Porter, but that one feels right to me.
Him and Deonte Banks, they love the corners in this draft. The Commanders taking corner at 16 is something that I expect to happen. And then you close out the draft 21 through 31. We already talked about Bijan at 28, which would be the most fantasy relevant part of this mock draft. But 21, the Chargers taking Jordan Addison. We had our earlier report from ESPN's Jordan Reed that they're on pass catchers. I've heard the same thing for a long time. Addison is that guy that can win at all 3 levels. He can play inside, outside, despite being small. There's a theme with the Chargers that they want receiving help, and the same could be said with the Giants. They've had a visit with Quentin Johnston. They need size. I know they got Darren Waller, who could play as a bigger slot option, but then they have a ton of tiny wide receivers. Quentin Johnston has that size. He's got build-up speed to win down the field, and they know that after signing Daniel Jones, they got to surround him with help.
Yeah, I mean they've got a bunch of wide receivers, but they all feel like sort of guys.
Same guy.
Waller, Waller I think was helpful, and so Quentin Johnson certainly becomes interesting if he winds up there as well. There isn't much other fantasy relevant guys here. Obviously, Bijan Robinson, we expect him to be the only running back in the first round to go. And
Gibbs has a small chance, but it's an outside chance.
Right.
I think running backs over 1.5 in round 1, Jay's significant plus money right now.
Yes, yeah, it seems like it's just going to be Bijan. And I think it's an interesting conversation with not just the wide receivers, with tight ends as well, just with the prevalence of passing now in the NFL and what we've seen from Justin Jefferson, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, these guys in their first year coming out, people weren't allowed to do that previously. And the fact that they're playing at that level, I think you're going to see guys, JSN's probably the biggest candidate just because he is such a heavy favorite to be the first wide receiver drafted. But I think these guys will have immediate impact, and we just have to kind of operate with that assumption going forward that, as a rookie, you can make that kind of impact.
Yeah, it'd just be interesting with him, just because we just don't know what this Packers offense will look like under Jordan Love. We think Jordan Love will be decent.
At least
it's hard
capable.
to see, but listen, Christian Watson had a really nice year last year. He exploded over the second half. We saw flashes from Romeo Doubs as well, and so it's still likely, especially given Jordan Love. I mean, if they were run heavy with Aaron Rodgers and conservative with Rodgers, can't imagine they're suddenly opening it up with Jordan Love. So it does feel like JSN, is more of a possession guy, more of a deeper PPR league play than in his rookie year than anything else.
Yep.
And they might get Corey Davis back in the trade. There's really real thought to that. So that kind of changes up the wide receiver room. But I'll be releasing a 3-round mock draft for draft week that I think will have much more fantasy impact, because this draft, like many, is loaded with day 2 and day 3 running backs and wide receivers. So
yeah, but it doesn't feel like it's a great wide receiver draft.
No, it's all depth pieces. Number 3s kind of galore.
Like there'll always be somebody that emerges. But feels like the real fantasy value from this draft will come from, honestly, is more dynasty with the quarterbacks and then the running backs.
Yep.
The running backs are where that'll play out.
All right.
What do we got next?
Download the Roto-World app to receive
yes.
breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the
promo.
competition
Yes.
by favoriting players on your roster. Get the latest injury updates, player news, and much more delivered right to your phone. It's available in your app store today.
For free. The
free.
Roto-World app is free. Just download it. What do you care? Because if you hate it, then you can just delete it. It's a free app. What are you doing? It take you 10 seconds. You should have it.
We haven't done best bets in a long time, Jay, it feels like. And it's appropriate. We've kind of hinted at some draft bets if they're in your market. Jay, what do you got this week? Which one are you looking at?
So I got a few. First one is, and I'm
Especially if you use promo code Barry at BetMGM.
Exactly. Risk-free bet up to $1,000.
Yes.
I've said that in a
Not
while,
too
but I believe
shabby.
that is the promo.
Correct.
I'm stealing this from a friend of ours, Brad Spielberger from PFF. I spoke to him yesterday. He said his best bet by far is Christian Gonzalez to be the first cornerback taken. Now, the thing is, one, I'm going to preempt your joke about find your own bets, Croucher. No, I'm going to find one from my friend, Brad Spielberger. And I think that with Devin Witherspoon, who's a heavy favorite to be the first corner taken, there's this assumption that he's just going to go to Detroit and that is just done. I don't think that's done at all. They could easily go, they could take an edge, they could even take a quarterback, they could take an offensive lineman. I don't think that's done at all, and if you make the assumption that that's not done, then all of a sudden I think Christian Gonzalez is very in play. He's plus 160. I think that should be closer to a coin flip. And then outside of that, Will Levis on BetMGM, plus 250 to go second overall. I think if they take a quarterback, it will be Will Levis.
Shake up the draft.
And then the other one that I like, first defensive player to be taken, Tyree Wilson, plus 275. I think Arizona are going to be the first team that takes a defensive player. I think they like Tyree Wilson more than Will Anderson, so I think that Tyree Wilson should be the favorite in that market.
I think that those are all really interesting, but I feel like that's not a parlay you want to do, right? Because if you did feels like either the Levis bet hits or the Tyree, because if they take Levis and Stroud is there at 3, I think there are going to be a lot of teams that want to trade up to Arizona, right?
Potentially, yep.
So, but I think that if Stroud and Young are off the board, then it's going to be hard for any team to trade into that Arizona. So then they probably take Tyree.
Potentially. I don't really understand the CJ Stroud thing at all. I don't understand why he's just not the pick at 2. And obviously was in the mix to go 1 for a long time too. But it just seems like the league is cooling on CJ Stroud overall. So there potentially is a chance that he slides.
Do you get that at all? I have two questions for you. Do you agree with Jay? Is that what you're hearing as well? That the league has soured for whatever reason on CJ Stroud? And is there any basis to this? Do you have any thought about this? Is it just because the Texans, for whatever reason, aren't definitely going to do it, and maybe there's reasons beyond just the player CJ Stroud, as you mentioned, same agent as Watson, et cetera, et cetera?
I think it's Texan-centric as a whole. I still think he's going to go early. I think it opens up the door to your scenario of Arizona getting their wish and getting out of the pick that they've been dying to get rid of. But I do think it's Texan-centric, where they are not sold on Stroud. They are not sold on the quarterback class after Bryce as a whole,
Yep.
and it could lead to a giant shakeup in the draft.
Did you guys see the movie Draft Day?
Oh,
Yeah.
of course.
Awful
It's
movie.
maybe the worst sports movie of all time.
It might be. It's awful. It's awful. And, and anyway, I won't ruin it for you if you haven't seen it yet. I'm no Jay Croucher here. The machinations that go on during that draft are just mind-boggling in terms of and how it winds up and how they get there. But none of which would ever happen. All that said, in draft day, if you remember, there's a quarterback prospect that everyone says is the no-brainer number one, the Andrew Luck, the Peyton Manning, the most complete quarterback prospect, ever kind of guy, the Trevor Lawrence, if you will, and he ends up dropping. He ends up dropping because the Browns, which is general managed by Kevin Costner, they're out on it's a whole thing. But it feels like it's a little bit of the plot of Draft Day here, which is because the Browns and Kevin Costner were sort of crazy, right? In that draft, they decided they didn't like the kid, the quarterback, and everyone was like, "What do they know? What do they know?" And then all of a sudden he starts dropping, and. Could it be something insane? Do you want to? Am I right?
Yeah, you are. It's just so funny. I'm not going to give away the plot to Draft Day, but the reason why he's dropping is just utterly hilarious. The birthday thing.
Whatever. It's a 15-year-old movie.
Yeah,
if you still want to watch it, that sucks. By the way, if you want to watch Draft Day, pause this right now and go watch Draft Day, and then come back here. But yes, none of his teammates went to his birthday party. That's why the quarterback drafts. And so Kevin Costner assumes that means he's not a good leader and his team doesn't like him and he's too much about him. By the way, this would be a good. How many players do you think went to Russell Wilson's birthday party this year?
Yeah, probably not that many.
There you go.
Yeah, they couldn't find it in his house with all the rooms.
All the rooms.
They showed up. They just couldn't find it.
Maybe.
But yeah, anyway, I think that you back Levis to go 2 at plus 250. You back Tyree Wilson plus 275, first defensive player. You hope to go 1 of 2.
Right.
Maybe you strike 2 of 2, but you hope to go 1 of 2. Also, some chance that the Texans could take Tyree Wilson at 2,
There's a
which
very
cashes
real
that
chance.
bet. So
very real chance.
Those would be my plays.
I like it.
Okay.
I like it.
Yeah, I mean that's really interesting. But yeah, I do think. Yeah, I think it's. That's my take. Is that I don't think both those things happen. I feel like one of those has a really good chance of happening.
Do you think the teams like Stroud enough that Tennessee or Tampa, there's not that many teams that can really trade up as the thing.
That's
it's
the
Tennessee
issue.
or Tampa, right?
That's the issue. Arizona's having that issue.
Yeah.
They've been trying to trade this pick.
So you need Tennessee or Tampa Bay or some other dark horse to like Stroud enough.
Give up a real package to make that's an astronomical leap, especially for Tampa Bay.
Yep.
So.
That's crazy.
The drama of the draft.
But it'd be fascinating to watch because, by the way, if say Stroud gets to 4, Arizona can't trade the pick. Whatever they've got, they're 10 minutes on the clock, and Arizona can't trade the pick. So that they say Levis goes 2, they can't trade the pick. They take Wilson. They take Tyree Wilson, and so now the Colts are at 4, and hey, we've been circling Richardson this whole time because we assumed Stroud was off the clock, off the board. Now what do we do? And so let's say they take Stroud. Now all of a sudden, who's in play for Anthony Richardson? Who again we think has massive upside, but
and that becomes a really interesting conversation for the Seahawks and Lions.
That's what I was going to say.
The Raiders.
To me, the Seahawks or the Raiders become to me really interesting, especially the Seahawks because they're since buying Geno for a year, and then
it's a perfect spot for him.
Perfect spot for him.
Yeah. Love it. That's a wrap for us.
Is it?
Yeah, it is a wrap for us. But we will be back next week.
Oh, you want to break down draft day more?
A little more
draft. How ridiculous is it?
I think it's my least favorite movie.
Well.
It's so many things and his mom, the wife of an NFL coach, wants to have the funeral the day of draft day when he's been dead for 2 weeks, but she's got to pour the ashes out on draft day. The whole thing is insane. The whole thing. And by the way, there's also a whole a movie that would never get made in the Me Too era, because there's
it's a disaster class.
It's a disaster. The whole thing is because of there's a romantic storyline, and the whole I need everyone to watch Draft Day so we can talk about it.
Next week we'll break down Hardball and the replacements. As we dive in.
All right,
stay with us all offseason.
We got a show next. Here's what we got. Next week we got a show, regular day on Wednesday, and then Thursday night we will be reacting to the draft, the 3 of us. So tune into that as we will react quickly to the fantasy relevant players that get drafted on draft day Thursday night. It is closing time now, which means you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. For Jay Croucher and Connor Rodgers, I'm Matthew Berry. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and RotoWorld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from RotoWorld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.